So Manchester United have reportedly agreed personal terms with Rasmus Hojlund, and so now to complete the deal they just need to negotiate a fee with Atalanta, which certainly isn't going to be easy, with Atalanta reportedly demanding around £60 million alongside another 7 or 8 in add-ons, which in euros is around 70 million up to about 80 million euros, which is a massive amount of money for United to pay. They've reportedly made a bid of around £50 million, and I think by the end of negotiations it will probably be a fixed fee of around 55 million with another 10 million pounds in add-ons. But given the fee, should Rasmus Hojlund be the player that United sign, or would they be better off turning to another option? But before I go any further, remember to subscribe to the channel and check out my Patreon podcast, which will be linked below. But also, if you want cheap, good quality football jerseys for the new season, or retro jerseys from the past 40 years, then check out jerseyfever.com, a link will be in my Instagram bio, and if you use coupon code Atlantis, you should get a discount as well. I'll leave my Instagram at the top of the description and comment section, and a link will be in my Instagram bio. Also, this is my editor's channel, I'll leave it linked in the description below as well. Now personally, I would just go for Harry Kane, because if you're going to pay, 50 to 60 million pounds for Rasmus Hojlund, who while certainly being very impressive at Atalanta, has only done it for one season, he's still only 20 years old, and potential is just that, it's just potential. And we've seen with players like Anthony Martial and Jadon Sancho that sometimes that potential doesn't translate into future ability. And with Hojlund, whilst he may come in and have a good season next season, he's not going to be able to have the sort of season that Harry Kane's going to have. You bring in Harry Kane, he probably scores at least 25 Premier League goals, alongside creating another 10 to 15 as well. And it's not just his goal scoring numbers or his creative ability, but his all-round game is world class. And also I do hear the argument that Harry Kane is now 30 and so you'd rather sign Hojlund because he's 10 years younger, you're going to get more out of him. I do think people have become a bit blinded by the word potential. Yes, you obviously want to build a team for the future, but most importantly for United right now in this moment, they need to bring in players who are going to have an instant impact and allow United to challenge for the Premier League. On social media, amongst a certain proportion of United fans, there seems to be this mentality of we can't compete for the title next season and so we should just look to build a squad for the next 2 to 3. I think this is a ridiculous way of looking at it. I think United have to be competing for the Premier League next season, no if no buts. You can't keep continuously building for the future, bringing in players who are going to need to develop and peak in the next 3 to 4 years. You need players who are going to come in and have an impact now, particularly with the likes of Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, Rafael Varane, Luke Shaw, etc. coming into their late 20s, early 30s, and so if you build for the future, those players are probably not going to be there. Casemiro's probably not going to be at the same level as he is now in the next 3 or 4 seasons, the same with Bruno Fernandes. And so if you're looking at the United squad right now, buying a player who's not really going to get to the level needed until the next 2 or 3 seasons just seems like you're wasting the potential of the squad. I think the whole Solskjaer era has sort of brainwashed people into thinking United or Tottenham or even Arsenal. United have to be going out and challenging for the Premier League. Because if you keep going around and around in circles, keep rebuilding, eventually your best players are going to decline and you're going to have to replace them. And United can't afford to go another 2, 3, even 4 seasons without a Premier League title, because City and even Liverpool are going to get more and more dominant, and it could easily be another decade before United win the Premier League, and suddenly you're looking at a scenario like the one that Liverpool had throughout the 90s and the 2000s, where you don't win a Premier League title for 20 to 30 years. And so for me, despite Harry Kane being 10 years older, I really can't understand anyone who'd rather sign Hojlund for £60 million compared to Harry Kane for what I think would be around 80 to 85 million. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. In an ideal world, which we definitely aren't in with the Glazers still in control, United would sign Rasmus Hojlund as a second choice striker with Harry Kane being the main option, with the Atalanta man being the long-term replacement for Harry Kane in 3 or 4 seasons when he eventually declines. But it's not even that I don't want Rasmus Hojlund to be signed, as I think he would be a fantastic signing for United, particularly with the long-term vision of him being United's number 9 for the best part of the 2020s. I'm just being realistic about what to expect from his first 1, maybe even 2 seasons. Realistically, he's not going to be the type of striker that's going to come in next year and hit 20 Premier League goals. Now maybe he does have the potential to be a Premier League striker who can pick up 20 to 25 within the next few seasons, I would say, but I think realistically you're looking at him maybe getting between 10 and 13 Premier League goals and maybe beyond 15 in all competitions. And so realistically, I think even if Hojlund is brought in, which it looks like he will be, I think United have to be looking for a second choice striker as well, because Anthony Martial's injury record just makes him completely unreliable, and with a striker like Hojlund, you do need that second choice option, particularly when he's maybe not playing well, when he's not able to get into the game, and just to take the pressure off of him. But whilst I do like the Hojlund signing, you can't ignore the fee, and for that kind of price you can pretty much go out and get any of the top young forwards in the world. So is Hojlund the right choice? Well, another young striker who I'm surprised hasn't been linked with United more heavily throughout this transfer window is Gonzalo Ramos at Benfica, who's still only 22 years old, despite already seeming like an established European striker. And in terms of goal scoring ability inside of the box, I think Ramos is one of the best strikers in Europe, as he has elite level movement inside of the box, very similar to someone like Radamel Falcao. He's got the ability to get across his man and look to get into the space between the opposition's goalkeeper and defenders. And so as someone like Erling Haaland does, Ramos does pick up a lot of tap-ins and what you would call easy finishes. But it's his movement to get away from the defender but also anticipate where the chance can be created, which is the real skill. And so whilst these goals don't necessarily look that impressive most of the time, his movement inside of the box certainly is. And whilst 19 at this point in time, I do think Gonzalo Ramos is the better goal scorer when compared to Rasmus Hojlund. I do think Rasmus Hojlund can close that gap over the next few seasons, as Hojlund, like Ramos, has excellent movement in the box. We saw that in the game where he scored a hat-trick for Denmark. And I think whilst Ramos is definitely a box striker, I think Hojlund's got a greater variety to his finishes. His pace and physicality will enable him to burst through on goal into 1v1 positions. I think he's probably a better finisher from wide positions inside of the box, and so as his reading of the game and anticipation gets a lot better, I do think he'll be able to match Gonzalo Ramos' goal returns. But in terms of what else they offer, I do think Rasmus Hojlund is the much better centre forward outside of the box. Whilst I do like how Ramos does link play when he drops off, and he does have good technical ability and link up play in congested areas around the box, he's very much an advanced centre forward who's going to retain a higher position, whereas I do think Hojlund has the ability to not just drop off from the forward line and essentially use his body as a target man to link play when he receives direct balls, but he's also got the ability to spin into the flanks and use his pace in behind the back line. And so having Hojlund as a centre forward with Marcus Rashford. Jonathan David is another young striker who's been linked with a lot of top clubs, and I would say he's very similar to someone like Anthony Martial. He's excellent at dropping off from the forward line and linking the play between the lines with one-touch passes, whilst also being an astute finisher when he receives the ball first time inside of the box as well. And he also provides the movement in behind the back line to get into 1v1 positions, which is definitely an asset for United, particularly with players like Mason Mount and Bruno Fernandes playing behind, with both having the ability to see and thread through balls in behind for Jonathan David to get in on goal. However, I do think Gonzalo Ramos is a better poacher inside of the box than Jonathan David, and this is reflected by his FB ref report. As well as he is certainly impressive, I don't think he's at the level of Ramos. And if David was to make the move to United, I do think he'd probably pick up around 12 to 15 Premier League goals, but I don't think he's the type of player who's got the potential to really kick on and be a 20 to 25 goal a season striker. Now, he may be able to get around 18 to 20, but in terms of being a world-class striker, I do think Rasmus Hojlund has greater potential. And whilst I could definitely see Jonathan David potentially reaching that level, I think at the moment, a move to maybe a Tottenham or an Aston Villa would be a better fit than a move to United. But we'll come on to specifically where each of the strikers I'm suggesting should move either this summer or in the future. And so out of Hojlund, Ramos and Jonathan David, I would still prefer Hojlund, as I think he's got all the attributes that Jonathan David has outside of the box in terms of his ability to carry the ball forward, receive direct balls to his feet and also link play, even though I do think David is better at linking play in congested areas when compared to Hojlund. But I do think Hojlund is a better goal scorer, and I do think we'll see his numbers dramatically improve over the next 2 or 3 seasons. Florian Balogun is another player who impressed last season in Ligue 1 at Rennes on loan from Arsenal, picking up over 20 league goals in the process. However, I don't think he's a clinical goal scorer. I think he's someone who's going to need to develop that part of his game, as Gabriel Jesus has to currently do at Arsenal. And this is because when you look at his FB ref report when compared against every other centre forward in Europe's top 5 leagues over the past 365 days, you can see that he massively overperforms his non-penalty XG, suggesting he's not as clinical a finisher as players like Ramos or even Hojlund in my opinion. But I do think Balogun could be one of those system strikers who adds a lot to the team outside of the box. His technical ability makes him the type of centre forward who's very good at linking the attack, whilst also having the dribbling ability to carry the ball forward, particularly into the penalty area, ranking in the 88th percentile for that metric. And Balogun is definitely the type of centre forward who would suit a system like Ten Hag's and Arteta's as well, very much being an extra attacker rather than just a striker, vacating those central positions, which could definitely work alongside players like Havertz, Mount, Bruno Fernandes, Martinelli and Marcus Rashford, who do like to make those runs into central positions. And so by utilising a striker like Balogun, who can pull off into wide positions, not only can he be an asset in progressing the ball into the final third and into the box, but just as people have said before with Harry Kane and even Gabriel Jesus, his movement off of the forward line is going to open up spaces for everyone else in behind him. However, I would put Florian Balogun in the same category as Jonathan David, as a player who I think could be a very good Premier League striker, but I just don't see him being able to reach that elite level, especially in the short to medium term. Maybe when he gets into his late 20s he can move into that world class category. I certainly wouldn't put that beyond him, but in terms of what United need right now, I think Jonathan David and Florian Balogun are probably a level below. But now we move on to two centre forwards who I would actually put in the same category as Rasmus Hojlund, and two players who I actually do think have world class potential, and both of them play for Brighton, and they are 19-year-old Julio Enciso and 18-year-old Evan Ferguson. Now some may argue that Enciso is more of an attacking midfielder than a centre forward, however I think he falls into the same category as players like João Felix, as I think he'd be perfect for the false 9 role. The reason I say this is if you watch Brighton play, they basically have two false 9s as centre forwards, with both players dropping off from the forward line, particularly during the build-up phase, looking to drag both centre backs out of that central area, and in doing so creating that box shape in the centre of the pitch. And Enciso is fantastic with his back to goal, receiving the ball and being able to flick the ball on and evade pressure, or receive the ball to feet and use his low centre of gravity to spin away from the pressing player before driving forward. And when you look at his FB ref report from last season in the Premier League when compared against attacking midfielders and wingers, not even forwards, you can see just how good he is at progressing the ball forward, ranking in the 94th percentile for his carries into the final third, the 84th for his carries into the penalty area, the 86th for his overall progressive carries, as well as the 97th percentile for his successful take-ons. And so you can see that even compared to attacking midfielders and wingers, who you usually expect to have higher ball progression metrics, certainly when it comes to carrying the ball forward, Enciso is up there with some of the best players in the Premier League. He also ranks incredibly highly for his non-penalty goals and his non-penalty XG. Now I will say he has scored a few worldies from outside of the box, so it does suggest that maybe he's not as good a finisher as his stats suggest, and he did only play 806 minutes from the Premier League last season. However, the fact that he ranks so highly, particularly for his non-penalty XG, as well as his other ball progression metrics, suggests to me that Enciso has the capabilities of becoming an elite level forward, and not just in the next 4 to 5 seasons, but as early as maybe 2024. And the same goes for Evan Ferguson, who is a different type of centre forward to Enciso, being much more of a traditional advanced forward who's going to retain a higher position instead of looking to float between the lines as the Paraguayan will. But whilst Julio Enciso's main attributes come when he's outside of the box, Evan Ferguson's definitely come when he's inside of the box. Just as strikers like Erling Haaland and Gonzalo Ramos had from a young age, Evan Ferguson, despite still being a teenager, just seems to have that knack of being in the right place and the composure and technical ability to get the ball into shooting positions, and then the finishing ability to take that chance, and we can see this from his FB ref report. In the 950 minutes he played in the Premier League last season, Evan Ferguson ranks in the 91st percentile for his non-penalty goals and the 86th percentile for his non-penalty XG, whilst also overperforming his non-penalty XG by 0.07 per 90, scoring 0.57 goals per 90 as well, which if sustained over the course of a whole season is truly elite level goal scoring output. But alongside Evan Ferguson's goal scoring, his ability to link the play with one-touch passing, particularly in the final third, is very good, and he also has that natural physicality and aerial ability inside of the box, which can be incredibly useful when your side is playing against a low block opposition, where the best way of breaking them down comes from crossing into the box. I think both Julio Enciso and Evan Ferguson, just like Rasmus Hojlund, have world-class potential. For Manchester United, of the three, I'd probably say Hojlund is the best option. But if Evan Ferguson was signed or Julio Enciso was signed to play more as a false 9, I still think both would be very good signings, but considering that both of the Brighton players will likely cost in excess of 70, maybe even as much as £75 million, I think Hojlund is still the best option. But in terms of the clubs that each of the centre forwards I've mentioned should go this summer, I would probably say that Gonzalo Ramos suits somewhere like Chelsea, competing with Nicholas Jackson for that number 1 spot. I think Jonathan David could actually be a good option for Newcastle, providing competition for Callum Wilson, but also having the age profile and the potential to be a very good long-term signing for Eddie Howe's side as well. I think Balogun could stay and be a very good alternative to Gabriel Jesus, but if he did want to leave, he'd probably command a fee of around £50 million, and I actually think Inter Milan playing in a front two with Lautaro Martinez would be the perfect fit for the American. And whilst I do think Enciso and Ferguson should definitely stay with Brighton for next season, I do think that Julio Enciso could be an excellent option if Newcastle were to appoint De Zerbi in the future. And personally, I think Evan Ferguson would suit either Manchester United or Arsenal next summer, depending on which of the two clubs needed a centre forward.